Welcome one and all, it's time for yet another tournament report. Age of Sigmar, Stormcaster back, 2,000 points at the TSN Arena, the centre of Nottingham, is November Nightmare. So, a couple of points on this event first of all, other than it obviously being 2,000 points. The scoring system for this event is different from your standard Age of Sigmar tournament, particularly the GW official ones, where it's all about purely how many wins you have and whether they were major or minor victories. And outside of that, the actual margin of victory doesn't really matter. In this tournament, the margin of victory is everything, because potentially, if you completely wipe out your opponent early and prevent them getting any points and you get a zillion points, then you'll win 20 points to nothing. In the event of a tie, it's 10-10, 10 points each, and then anything between you'll end up with wins such as 11-9, 12-8, and so on. So, other than that, there is also no Cron Spine allowed, and there are no unique Battle Tome specific battle tactics. So only the General's Handbook battle tactics in use. So let's get rid of this beautiful episode thumbnail here, and see the first scenario. This battle plan is the mighty and the cunning, and you can see the two armies laid out there. So I'll go through my list first of all, some of which has actually been deployed on the table, because unfortunately you can't put every single Stormcast Eternals unit in the heavens as much as I might like to. So, it's similar to the lists I've been playing previously, but tweaked yet again. And there's a rather large twist on it this time, something a bit outside the box thinking taking place here. So, you'll know that I recently dabbled with the Astral Templars, who of course prevent enemy monsters from carrying out monstrous rampage actions, which is obviously a very handy ability. And I suspected there were going to be plenty of monsters at this event, because apparently ogres are the new hotness, and ogre armies generally have a monster or two in them. So preventing them from doing what my army does is kind of important, because anything like that, my army relies on getting in there on my terms, doing some damage, and then dying. Not dying before they get the chance to do damage. So monstrous actions, of course, they can step on you, and failing that, they can also just prevent you from having command points spent on you, and having no commands issued to that unit, so that the actual killiness of them can go down as well. So I just don't want monstrous rampages on my arm affecting any of my units. So that's the goal for Astral Templars. So I've stuck with them for this game. However, the outside the box part of it is that Bastion is back in the list, despite him being the Lord Commander of the Hammers of Sigmar. So he's fighting outside of his sub-faction, which means that two of his special rules can only be used on him, because they're specific to Hammers of Sigmar units. So his free command point per turn, he can only use it on himself, which is okay, because he's mostly going to be trying to charge things, and having that command point purely just for him to reroll his charges. If he fails, if he doesn't, he can just spend it to make himself better at fighting, or certain situations he could use it to redeploy himself. So it's more limited in what he can do with it. And it also means that he can only redeploy himself at the end of the deployment phase, instead of D3 units, because the rest of the units are not Hammers of Sigmar, so he can't deploy those again afterwards. So, got Bastion in there. Who else? We have obviously got the Lord Imperatant with the Arcane Tome, and he's got Chain Lightning as his spell. Obviously he's in there to bring Annihilators down 7 inches away from the enemy instead of 9 inches away. We've got the Lord Relictor, who's the General. He's got the High Priest command trait and Translocation Prayer, so we can re-roll that Translocation, which is already a 2+, so should hopefully never fail. Famous last words. And then for battle line, we've got Liberators, 2 units of 5, and 1 unit of 5 Judicators with Skybolt bows. And those are all Expert Conquerors. Then other units, we've got 2 sets of 3 Annihilators with Grand Hammers, and a Stormstrike Chariot, which is the stabby version, not the shooty version. We've got 3 Vanguard Raptors with Long Strike Crossbows, and then 3 Ether Wings. So it comes to exactly 2,000 points, which is quite rare when building a list. things I was toying with in my head before this event, I was thinking about trying to put the Knight Heraldor into there, because there's often large terrain pieces at these events, and it could be quite scary, but in the end I decided not to. It couldn't wrangle the list enough to fit him in, and the Ether Wings are a solid choice. So Ether Wings are useful for two things. So, as I was saying, the goal of my army is to hit without the chance for the opponent to stop it, and then make sure I do all my damage, and then get killed. That's the plan. So, the things that I'm trying to avoid, I'm trying to avoid the things that can kill you before you fight, like the monstrous rampages, so of course Astral Templars deals with that. The only thing that can be monstrous rampaged is Bastion, so if I just keep him away from the monsters, there will be no rampages. The other thing is obviously Unleash Hell, which can be an issue for Annihilators. So Ether Wings being in there, potentially there could be situations where I can throw them in to eat the Unleash Hell first. If I think it's particularly dangerous, then that is something that can be played with. They're also useful because they give +1 to hit the long strikes to a target within 12 inches of the Ether Wings. And particularly important, potentially, because with the Thunderbolt Volley Holy Command, you can't use all-out attack on it because it's in the hero phase. So the Ether Wings being there just gives you that +1 to hit in the hero phase, and then you can also do it in the shooting phase, assuming you keep them in the same position. So double uses for them. Also, of course, just objective grabbing potentially as well. And you'll notice in my setup, in fact, you know what, I haven't even enlarged the cursor or the pointer yet. My keyboard tray is getting very squeaky here. I hope that wasn't too deafening for everybody. So I'll just bring up the thumbnail a second, and I'll just increase my mouse pointer size. Okay, let's increase it to 8. There we go. That's much better, isn't it? So you can see the Lord Relictor is right there. All the other units form a big bubble around him, because for him to translocate them, they'll have to obviously begin the turn wholly within 12 inches of him. So it gives me a lot of freedom deciding which unit to teleport, keeping units around him. It's almost a guarantee, this translocation, with the reroll. And then off the table, my standard, what I go into the game expecting to deploy off the table are the 2 units of Annihilators and all my battle line units, so both Liberators and the Judicators, so all my Expert Conquerors off the table. Now that's not always the case. As you can see on the battlefield here, there are actually some Liberators down. There are also the Ether Wings, the Lord Imperatant, Bastion, Long Strikes, the Chariot, and off the table you can see I've only got 4 units starting off the table in this game. So the battle plan is the Mighty and the Cunning. So there are, and we're not using, this tournament does not use the bonus points for Galatian veteran units being destroyed. So there are 4 objectives along the centre, and it's pretty standard scoring scenario. Get a point if you control 1 objective, another point if you control 2, and a further point if you control more than your opponent, and then 2 for your battle tactic. So previously my army has struggled sometimes to complete 5 battle tactics. I can usually get 4, but because my Galatian veterans aren't the most killy in close combat, then that rules out 1 or 2 of them. And because my general is the Lord Relictor, just so he can take the command trait, then that kind of makes some of the others not as doable as well, because it relies on your general killing things. So some of the battle tactics are kind of limited, and yeah, I can get 5 sometimes, but it does get tricky occasionally. There are a few that are just virtually guaranteed for my army at some point during the game. So if you think about desecrate their lands, I can, anything that involves you landing in a particular place, I can usually guarantee that, because I'm bringing lots of units down off the table and I can teleport things willy-nilly. So quite happy there. So what am I up against in this game? So it's Sylvaneth. You can probably see they're a bit tree-ish over there, and get some close-ups. They're not finished painted, most of these, by the way. So don't go thinking that it's like a burnt down forest colour scheme. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. We've got couple of people in the chat already. Hello to Bad Squiddo. And Bardokas. Hello there. So, Sylvaneth, Subfaction Heartwood. And Grand Strategy is the same as mine, which is take what's theirs, if I didn't mention that earlier. So it's very easy for me to accomplish that, because obviously all the teleporting that goes on, and I'm generally going to be in my enemy's territory a lot. Difficult to prevent me scoring that usually. And this army I'm up against also has lots of teleporting shenanigans. So it's going to be interesting. And there are a couple of things in there that I generally don't want to see when I'm looking at an opposing army. Obviously, I don't want them to be able to teleport, because then my teleporting units can't just reign supreme in the teleportation stakes. So I don't really have the advantage on that necessarily, especially when certain units can just do it better than the Stormcast can in some circumstances. So they have got in this list the Lady of Vines, who is 325 points with some spells, which I believe is this one here. Then there is an Arch Revenant and a Warsong Revenant. So the Arch Revenant... Where's the Arch Revenant? The Arch Revenant, that might be the one with the wings there. Is that the Arch Revenant? Or is that the Warsong Revenant? Either way, one of them's the Arch Revenant, one of them's the Warsong Revenant. I can never remember which is which. Don't play against Sylvaneth very often. But I believe this is the... just going by the fact it's got a bigger base, I assume this is the... Yeah, Warsong Revenant is the more expensive one on the larger base. There we go. Got Grimdarwald confirming that there. Yep, so that would be my instinct. Anything with a larger base is going to be more expensive, surely. So Warsong Revenant there, Arch Revenant there. So the Warsong Revenant here is the General, who has... Let's see, Spellsinger, the Vesperal Gem, Freesong, Verdant Blessing. So lots of stuff going on there. And so one of the notable points about this army that I learned before the game is that many of them can fight and then teleport away from combat. So if you let them hit you, they can just teleport away. I have encountered that before, but I think there's a lot of units that can do that here, potentially. And a lot of them that can just teleport throughout the game whenever they feel like as well. And so there are 2 units of Tree Revenants, which would be... I assume it's that unit there and that one. And there is... Let's see, there's Kurnoth Hunters with Kurnoth Scythes, which is this big, horrible, scary unit here. So that unit, let's see, how much does that cost? 500 points, that. So that is beastly. So Kurnoth Hunters are probably comparable in power to like your Annihilator type units. So comparable in points per model as well. And Revenant Seekers, which is going to be this big unit here, I imagine. Is it? Let's see. No, that might not be right, actually. There's the Spiked Rider Lancers. Yeah, there's 2 of these units, so one of them... Let's see, I've got the list right in front of me here. I'm just trying to work out exactly what's what. So I think... Let's see. Sylvaneth get 2 teleports for existing, one in the movement phase and another after fighting. Though they are bound by sitting next to trees or certain terrain to pull it off. Yes, there are some limits to it. Okay, so we've got 2 of these flying units. The way they were described to me is that one of them does healing and one of them does fighting. So, I believe that the healing one is over here. I think they're the healy ones and they're the fighty ones. I think that's right. So the healy ones, they just have to be near you and they can just bring a model back. So it's a bit like the Yndrasta ability, except her ability isn't really practical because there's other issues with her that stop her fitting into lists very well. But this unit, I think, just lands near a friendly unit and just whoop, a model comes back, essentially. So what I'm thinking immediately is that I'm probably not going to take out this unit throughout the game. So for the most part, if I can just kill other things, that would be nice. Obviously, the way my army is set up, it's set up to take down monsters. So anything that's large, like this or this, is always a juicy target, even if they're not, things aren't technically classed as monsters always, just big stuff with lots of wounds, because then I can synergize and use all my abilities against it, because you've got Bastion's ability to rain down lightning with the wounds characteristic number of dice, so anything with lots of wounds is an obvious target for that. And obviously it's more difficult for that kind of unit to hide as well, with them being so large, so shooting them, and then Annihilators going in there to finish them off. Because they tend to have good armor saves, some of these big scary things, so lots of mortal wounds from long strikes and Annihilators impact hits. Okay, and there's also an endless spell. There is the Spite Swarm Hive is there. Okay, and there's also the terrain, the Awakened Wildwood, which can be positioned. So there's a piece of it there. And certain terrain pieces can be marked as overgrown as well, which means that they give some effects of being a wildwood, but not others. So it's quite a complicated army, really. So turn 1. Now, it should be pointed out that I have 11 drops. So very rarely am I going to be choosing who goes first or second. So all I can really do is try and nudge someone into a particular decision. So for example, if my long strikes are not able to shoot someone in the hero phase, then unless they've got a really compelling reason, they should probably just make me go first. Now, not necessarily, because of course I've got the Relictor and I can translocate the unit before they actually fire in the hero phase, but they do need to be near a hero to be given that holy command. So there are limits to it. So I have to kind of set up 50-50. I have to be prepared for if I go first or second, and give my opponent really something to think about. And if there's one thing I would rather do first, I have to set up in such a way that nudges my opponent towards giving me that. So, for example, if I actually would rather go second, then I can set up quite aggressively. Not completely, just aggressively enough so my opponent thinks that's what I'm going for. So if I do go first, I'd be in a position to strike. So, thinking they would probably give me second turn. Second is generally better, unless there are things that can just jump on you immediately in turn 1, like this army certainly does have. If they can't, then making me go first means that I'm more limited in places I can land with my units, with my teleporting units. But if I go second and you start advancing, obviously you're leaving gaps behind, it's more difficult to screen things when you start spreading out. So, generally I like to go second, but going first means that the long strikes can start shooting at things before anything's happened. So with the teleporting in this army, I'm not entirely sure what I would rather have. So my opponent elects to go first, and you'll see why in a minute. So first of all, 3 of my units are marked as targets for the entire game, which means that they get +1 to hit them, just because they exist. Let's see. Daniel says that my voice has been known to tame wild basilisks, but infuriate the elves of Mirkwood. Interesting. And over here, we've got a +1, let's say +1 ward there. I think they're just effects that you can give off throughout the game in this army. There's no way I'll be keeping track of all of it, but I think those little notes are helpful. I think there's some kind of ward going on. It might just be for this model, perhaps. So, one thing to note, when I'm looking at anything with a 5+ ward save, that does not deter me from trying to mortal wound it to death. For future reference for anyone. So, a 5 or a 6 ward save, I generally look at that as I'm just going to try and blitz through it. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but that's how I look at things. If it's a 4+ ward save, I'm probably going to ignore it, but 5 or 6 usually ignore the model, I mean. 5 or 6, I usually think, well, they're going to fail most of those ward saves anyway, so I'm just going to keep going for it. So lots of moving up, and you can see a bit more of the wood has come down here. So that blocks my line of sight, which is obviously annoying for shooting purposes. But you can still move through it. And then these big what are they even called again? Kurnoth hunters. So they teleport 9 inches away from the ether wings. And so heading into turn 1, I wasn't actually aware that this unit here could also teleport. So I only thought it was the smaller tree people. So even then, they've landed, and I think they get a bonus to their charge, potentially. So it's a pretty good chance. So they get into the ether wings, and then of course when they pile in, they're going to be able to hit other things as well. And don't forget, earlier I mentioned that after they fight, they can just teleport away. So they don't even care about charging in next to Bastion, because they can hit me and then just run. So that what they want to do is get in here, kill the long strikes, and escape. And I believe those are the saving throws of the long strikes, maybe? Probably. So they all die. And then they're just going to teleport away. They kill a couple of ether wings as well, because not all of them could reach the long strikes. They don't even bother targeting Bastion, of course. And I think we're into my next turn now. Or my first turn, should I say. So I've gone eye for an eye, because obviously a unit was killed, and I'm fairly confident I can kill something in this turn. So you can see I've brought down some Liberators and Judicators here, with the intent of taking down this unit. And wait a second, let me have a look. Okay, let's also point out, okay, that's actually the Lord Imperatant saves, so he was killed as well. Lord Imperatant died, Long Strikes died, most of the ether wings died, so terrible. And had it been in my mind that these guys were going to be able to teleport, then I certainly would have probably tried to use Liberators to screen my characters or spread out my characters so not everything could be hit so readily. But they're dead. So because of that, that means I decided to just bring down all my Annihilators at once, because they have to be 9 inches away anyway. And once they're on the table, I might actually get a double turn anyway. So if I bring them down and they fail the charge, then I might get to go with them next turn and move before my opponent does. You can see these Annihilators have made it into combat down here. Bastion was translocated up there, and he also failed the charge in addition to these Annihilators. But these ones got in. The Chariot gets in to the Kurnoth Hunters that teleported away. Does a bit of damage. And you can see, well, let's have a look what was there a minute ago. So there it is. The Lady of Vines was there and is no longer there, which suggests the Annihilators whomped the Lady of Vines to death with their big hammers. And I'm sure Bastion will have chipped in as well with his rain down the lightning of Sigmar down from the heavens on things with lots of wounds. And there we go, the Relictors moved up. So because you have to plan in advance when you're going to translocate, I would like to have the Chariot wholly within 12 there, because if that thing survives any length of time, I would probably like to teleport it out of combat with translocate. And those Annihilators don't take too much in return from that little unit there. So if I get the double now, I can potentially redeem that setup error that got some of my important units killed at the start. And I do get the next go. So, I don't think I've put down my victory points yet. So I did kill a unit, and I've gone for against the odds this time, which is quite an easy one to score. So the Annihilators that came down up here, they've made their way down so they can charge into this unit. And the Liberators have just gone into there to claim the objective. Judicators and the Relictor are just all hanging out here. I think the Relictor might have translocated himself over here, because what I would like to do later is translocate one of these units onto another objective, probably. So it's a good place for him, and also he can issue commands around here. Particularly if I've generated an extra command point for him, then he has to use that from him, not from a unit champion. So it's useful for him to be there. You can see Bastions come into the action, and the Annihilators have come in, mopped up things down here, and trying to kill all the Kurnoths. They do kill the Chariot, but the Annihilators get in there, do some more damage, So we've kind of pulled it back here. In the first round, so in the first turn, I was only able to get 2 victory points. Because I think all the objectives were taken by the enemy and I couldn't take it. I couldn't actually gain control of any of them in that round. Nor did I particularly want to. So with this list, I'm kind of gifting my opponent a lead at the start in quite a few of the games, because I'm usually keeping a lot of my high-scoring units off the table until later on. And the point of that is, if I have them down at the start, they may well get me 1 or 2 more victory points, but they're going to die very easily, while the enemy's still at full strength. The Annihilators don't really need the Liberators or the Judicators to be on the battlefield to succeed. The Annihilators come down, try and kill something in a favourable trade, then die. The next batch of Annihilators do the same thing, and then everything else just comes down when it's safe to do so, when the enemy is sufficiently whittled that I can plop down on objectives and be relatively safe, or if I need a screen somewhere. Okay, so that's how it's looking. So this side of the battlefield is looking very good for me, that side looking better for my opponent. And you can see how important it is to have the Relictor here as well, because I've got lots of units here that are kind of stuck in this position. So things will have to be teleported out of this area. So I've got a few more points that time, but can't get all the objectives yet. But we're doing really well killing stuff now. My opponent goes for this one's mine, and with the general wants to kill the Annihilators. Oh no, it was the Ether Wing, because there was one left. Yeah, picked an Ether Wing, the easiest battle tactic ever, kill 1 Ether Wing with any of your attacks or abilities. So yeah, the Ether Wing dies. See, Daniel says, I really like these bat reps, brings me back to ye old days of reading White Dwarf but with better commentary. That is a compliment that I will accept. I used to read the old White Dwarf battle reports. Very inspiring when you'd see the little maps, pictures of the units, and then the close-up images. Very inspiring to be at school reading White Dwarf magazine. One of the cool kids, of course. So Ether Wings are dead. So that's the battle tactic accomplished. And everything else is, well, they've teleported away, because why not? And then they just get models back, because this unit just gives them models back, because that's how it works. And it's another one of those, I've talked before about like the feel bad rules in the game, where things that one player has done are just undone without much interaction involved. So I would include some of the Stormcast abilities in that as well, just so I'm not picking on the other factions. But anytime you just get things back without actually having to do much, and without the opponent being able to do much about it, it always feels bad. Same with Bastion getting all his wounds back. You don't always get a say in that. So, I'm still behind, but feeling okay about it. Bastion is moving up. I've put Finest Hour on him, in case he actually gets into combat, but he'll have to make a charge. But he does have his command point, his personal command point. We're just hanging out on this objective, but one of them got killed. And yeah, so we went straight into my opponent's turn without looking at the score here. So they're running away from Bastion, and rightly so. So they managed to pick up... Wait a minute. So that wasn't my turn at all. It wasn't Bastion moving, it was them moving away from Bastion I was taking a picture of. So I put Finest Hour on him in case they wanted to attack him, and that's maybe what deterred them from doing so. But maybe they were going to run away from him regardless. So barrage through enemy lines was successful, because there are a couple of units that have just either moved or teleported down here. And they get... are they Galatian veterans? I'm not sure whether they get the bonus... No, I don't think they get the bonus point. Oh, they do actually, yeah, but that's why it's 5. Because they hold 1, they hold 2. Battle tactic plus 1 for them being Galatian veterans. Which is a battle tactic I can mimic as well. Which is exactly what I'm going to do now, in my turn 3. So, we've got some Liberators. I think this is the last unit, the Liberators, that comes down out of the sky. I think the other one that moved earlier... Let's see. So prior to that, I think I've only got 1 unit of Liberators on the table and the other one is still off. So these ones were translocated into that position, and then the Judicators came down from the heavens here. So I've still got one unit of Liberators that are coming down now, which is there, and then I translocate the Judicators here so they can shoot. And Bastion is making his way into combat. So Bastion whomps some of these things. Judicators shoots them down as well, I think, or they may have shot at the king. It's not a king. What is it called? That's another army that will be coming up later that has a king. It is the Warsong Revenant. There we go. So everyone else is kind of gathered around this objective, so we're going to have to teleport them away at some point to make them useful. So again, I've got 1, 2, and I've got my battle tactic and the bonus point for it. So, picking up points. My opponent's next and chooses Desecrate their lands, which is probably an auto success. Just have to pick some terrain to desecrate. And you can see that, where are we looking here? So here, this little flying hero is appeared there, near the Annihilators. And Kurnoths are moving towards the Liberators. Bastion isn't in too much peril there. And they're just hanging out. So they do desecrate, but only get 4 points that time because no bonus. I choose to desecrate as well because it's just an auto succeed, because if you look, I've got units that are just hanging out on enemy territory terrain, so it can't possibly be stopped. Bastion finishes off that unit. The Annihilators manage to kill that hero. And it's looking good at the moment, kind of. You can see, okay, so Liberators here, no Liberators there. So the Relictor has translocated some Liberators over there, and that unit there were killed by the Kurnoth Hunters previously. So I've got that one. I've now got more, so I've got 5 points. So we're catching up now, only 1 turn left each though. And my opponent goes first and picks eye for an eye. So just has to kill a unit. So I don't want to lose a unit if I can help it. The Liberators are being attacked though. And by the looks of it... Okay, so obviously when it's coming towards the end of the game we're in slightly more of a rush, so the pitches are a bit more rushed. So I went for gaining momentum in my turn, and only got 3 points for the last turn. Because I don't think I was able to kill a unit in that turn. But I did have 1 objective, 2 objectives, and more than my opponent. So that's what I got the 3 points for, but I couldn't get a battle tactic. There was just nothing I could accomplish. But I did get my grand strategy, having more units in the deployment area than my opponent. And I believe my opponent was not able to do... Let's see. I'm going to open the General's Handbook on the page for this battle plan, because I want to make sure I'm getting this analysis 100% accurate. So, because there's a couple of different maps with very similar layout. So this one is, as I flip through the pages, this one is the Mighty and the Cunning. So yeah, the territory is only very shallow. So I think my opponent has... that unit has teleported from down here up there to try and stop me getting my grand strategy. I think that was what was going on, but because of all the teleporting I could do, I was able to actually get my grand strategy. And then the Lord Relictor was able to translocate himself down here to prevent my opponent getting the grand strategy. So how many units have we got left each? I've got 5, my opponent has 4 by the looks of it. So the fact they're able to teleport, I feel like my opponent could have definitely got a grand strategy here with a different approach. But as it stands, I was able to get mine, my opponent was not, which means we ended up with a draw. Because at the scoring at this event, you have to get 2 more points than your opponent, 2 more victory points in order to win the game. and I believe I got one more victory point than my opponent. Means it's a draw. So, that's 10 points each. On to round 2. This is the prize of Gallet. And in this scenario, the objectives are not active at the start. You activate one each turn. Player who goes second picks which one to activate, and in the first turn you can only pick one of the 3 along the centre line. Small, shallow territory again, lots of no man's land in the centre. And other than that, scoring is standard. So it's just going to be one objective becoming active each turn, and then stays active for the whole game. So I'm against ogres. It was supposed to be the ogre meta was coming to town for this event, and there were quite a few ogres there. This is my first taste of them. So I'm going to bring up the list for this ogre army now, and tell you what's going on with it. So I've gone for what I consider my standard setup. Apart from the chariot being far away, everyone within 12 of the relictor, apart from the chariot on this occasion, which is over there, and then all my expert conqueror units and all the annihilators in the heavens, everyone else on the table. So for that, 5 units in the heavens. Opponent has got Mournfang. There are 3 units of Mournfang. This is one of them. There's another with just 2. And this here is... well, this will be the Frost Lord on Stonehorn, which is 445 points, so pretty tasty. And apparently it's got a really good Monstrous Rampage, which I'm going to deny it using. Then there are 2 Iron Blasters, which are the new hotness at the moment. There are the other unit of 4 Mournfang. And there's a unit of 2 Frost Sabres. And they mostly hang out with... I think it's the... is it the Blood Pelt Hunter that they hang out with off the table? And then they can kind of come in during the game. I think that's right. And there is also... let's see. There's an Icebrow Hunter. Oh, it might be the Icebrow Hunter. One or the other. So one of them is on the table and one of them is off the table with the 2 Frost Sabres chilling, and they can just come down as if they're teleporting. So, what is my plan here? Well, they're quite spread out and they don't have any screening units. That's what I like to hear. So I'm going to, when I'm choosing how to prioritise a target for my annihilators here, if we look at the wide shot, it's quite a close grouping of units over on this side. This unit of 4 Mournfang is really dangerous. It's 350 points, and it's on its own. Kind of. There's a unit of 2 there as well, but it doesn't have nearly the same level of support as this side. So, I'm thinking if I can take out that 1 unit at the cost of one of my units of annihilators, that's a pretty good trade, because the annihilators are 240 points. So they're up on the trade, they'll need help with shooting, but I think they can do it, potentially. So that's what I'm looking at as a target initially. That just jumps out at me. And, for example, this guy would also be a juicy target, but probably not yet. I'm thinking if I can kill them, I might not even lose the annihilators immediately. Whereas if I go in there, they might kill him, but the annihilators are immediately dead. It's because he's shot to death and all kinds of horrible things are coming their way. So, you've noticed everyone's hiding from the Iron Blasters. And my opponent is of course going to decide whether I go first or second. So, in this instance, I've set up so I can't be shot by the Iron Blasters, but I can threaten the Mournfang with the long strikes. So, we'll see whether my opponent chooses to go first or second. What would you do if you were the Ogre player here? Would you go first or second? So, I will show you what the decision is. So, opponent elects to let me go first and activates this token here. This objective, so that one's now active. The centre, which is probably a decent move because if I'm going to get on that, it's going to be right in the line of fire of the Iron Blasters, and the Frost Lord is also going to be right in there. And then this one has turned into the Proving Ground, which just means that that can't be used as Proving Ground again in the future. My enemy has no Galatian veterans. So I pick against the odds because it's just easy. And you can see I've put Mystic Shield and all-out attack on them at some point. But they do shoot in the hero phase as well with the Thunderbolt Volley. They shoot off. I think they just shoot straight off a couple of Mournfang. So I decide, you know what? Because I already instantly killed a couple, I'm going to bring down the Annihilators in the middle between those two units. It did some more wounds. This unit ended up losing another model. There's only one of them left, so I think actually the unit of 2 is a juicier target now, because the Annihilators killing just one Mournfang is a bit of a waste, so I decide they're going to go and try and kill 2. And then I translocated Bastion 9 inches away, so that maybe he could go in and kill that one. But you can see he didn't make his charge. But we've totally crippled this flank, really. There's only one Mournfang running around on its own now. That was a unit of 4 down to 1, and this unit of 2 is completely dead. So, although that unit isn't dead yet, I still think that's a good trade. The amount that we've killed there, unless they all get rallied back, which would be very lucky, then I think that's a good deal. And the Ether Wings have just flown up onto this point to just score the objective, just to get some points early on, and you can see 4 points have been dished out to the Frost Lord, which I think was Bastion's Lightning that did that. So, feeling quite happy about that turn, and scored 4 points. So my opponent also goes for against the odds, and that sweet, sweet measuring action with real human hands on display. But the one Mournfang is just running for its life, and the Iron Blasters just completely obliterate the Ether Wings, so just a single feather drifts down into the snow, I imagine, and they're all dead. So, my opponent is now controlling the objective, so he's going to score points. And then in combat, the Frost Lord and this Mournfang go for the Annihilators, and they are going to kill them. And there you go. So, the Annihilator's gone, but I think it was a good trade to kill all those Mournfang that ended up dying as a result of that turn. So next up, my opponent gets the double and goes for gaining momentum and wants to kill the chariot. So the Mournfang get into position to charge the chariot. And the one thing about the chariot being out on its own, it's not elite or anything, so it can't issue commands on itself, so I can't redeploy it unless there's a hero nearby. And there's the Iron Blaster to shoot it as well, but the chariot's pretty sturdy, so I'm not entirely sure it's going to die. The Frost Lord has moved back into the centre. The Hunter there, who when he's near terrain apparently is considered not a viable shooting target, which is something I learned. And there you go. So momentum, because I picked I think I picked this. Did I pick that objective to become active? Because I went second that turn. So let's see. So I think I picked that one, but also made it proving grounds, so it can't be stolen. So my opponent has one objective more than me, which is 2, and then the battle tactic, which is another 2, which explains the 4. So can't get 2 objectives because one of them is the proving ground, and my opponent has no Galatian veterans. So I go eye for an eye because I'm pretty sure I'm going to kill something this turn, and Bastion just goes and kills that Mournfang that was hanging out there, which was here, this one. So that's the... And I've also put down the Judicators, so one of them is touching it, so they can take this objective, so I'll get more points. Lord Imperatant, I translocate him up there, because obviously if this big scary thing goes backwards to deal with him, that means he's not fighting my more important stuff, and if they leave him alone, then he's just going to make it easier for me to get my grand strategy later, and also barge through enemy lines. So, okay, the Annihilators. Annihilators plop down, and I decide that I'm going to go for the Iron Blasters. Now, you might think, why would you go after the Iron Blasters when they can unleash hell on you? Well, the Iron Blaster was already shot. It had already taken some wounds from shooting. And there's a nice clear picture instead of the blurry one. So you can see the first Iron Blaster is dead. It took quite a few wounds, The Annihilators got in there, did their impact hits, and did some serious damage to it. Then, when it unleashed hell, it killed 2 of them. They exploded, and when they exploded, it was summoned back up to join Sigmar. The blast killed the Iron Blaster, which meant that they hadn't piled in yet. So this one piled in to the second Iron Blaster, which was right next to it, attacked it. You can see it's got up to 7 wounds now. And then, when it fought back, he's gone. Now, I'm not sure if it actually killed him or whether he ran away through Battle Shock. I believe it was Battle Shock. So, Iron Blaster didn't kill him in retaliation. I rolled a 6 for his Battle Shock test, failed it, which means he's counted as slain. And then I got 2 6s on his... what's it even called? I can't remember what it's called, but the lightning that comes to suck them back up into the Celestial Realm and does damage to the nearby things on a 6. I rolled 2, and that was enough to kill the second Iron Blaster. So Exploding Stormcast killed 2 Iron Blasters. So that is a really good trade for that unit of Grand Hammers. So let's see, how expensive are the Iron Blasters? 170 each. So yeah, good trade to take down 2. And that worked out perfectly. So we've got rid of the huge threat. They're actually dead, so they'll be gone in a second. So I got my eye for an eye battle tactic. And I'm not controlling lots of objectives though. Just the one, because the others aren't active yet. So there's high scoring is going to come in the later turns when there's more objectives that have been activated. My opponent is now down to 3 units. Is it 3? But there's also the ones that haven't come in yet off the side of the table, are still waiting. There's 2 units there. I've got some Liberators still in the sky as well for turn 3. I think I've got, is it both Liberator units still to come down? I think so. So I've got 3 more units to come in. So I get to go next. And I choose Gaining Momentum. And because whichever of the objectives becomes active, I can take it quite easily. Okay, so Bastion here. He succeeded with an 11-inch charge and killed the hunter that was there. You can see the Frost Lord is also gone. That's because I was able to shoot it down via getting the turn, shooting it with the long strikes and the Judicators. Just so many wounds and it's gone. So killed that. And this objective was made active, so I just brought down some Liberators on it, so they were able to take that. And it's going very well. So there's only the Mournfang and the small number of units that haven't come in yet. I think it's... Yep, so they're going to come in on turn 3. So I got my battle tactic. This is where the big scoring comes in. So I've got 5. And my opponent's turn 3, it's not 2, it's 3, goes for eye for an eye. Kill a unit. Brings on the Hunter and the Frost Sabres. And gets the Mournfang in position up there. So obviously they want to kill the Liberators to get eye for an eye, which will also get them that territory as well. That objective, when they do kill them quite handily. Despite all-out defense being played, as you can see there. And that gets 3 points for the battle tactic and holding an objective. So really, in this, the way this tournament's scored, even if you're losing and you feel like you're definitely going to lose, as my opponent probably was feeling right here, it's still worth trying to maximise getting as many points as possible, because the margin of victory determines how many tournament points you get. So if you lose by a smaller amount, you'll get more points. So it's always worth trying to maximise your points, even if you're going to lose. So I choose, for my next round, Desecrate Their Lands, which is just an automatic complete for me, because I've got units that can teleport and I'm just near terrain anyway, so it's just easy. And Bastion is making his way over there. I'm just covering all the objectives. And I think I've translocated the long strikes down there. So, at this point, I'm making a mistake. So, my grand strategy is definitely achievable, having more units than the enemy inside the deployment area at the end of the game. However, barge through enemy lines battle tactic, I haven't done it yet. And I need 2 units in there to get that at the end of a turn. So I've been moving units down this way when it's not really necessary. So there's less units to head back up that way now. And I've even been teleporting units around, teleported them down here so they could see, so they could shoot things. When really I should have been thinking all about the grand strategy and barge through enemy lines here. And just started putting things heading towards my opponent's areas. Because this objective wasn't active yet. When really these liberators could just spread themselves out and cover both of those. So these ones could be heading there already. So getting a bit carried away here. My opponent's next turn goes for desecrate their lands as well, which is just an auto-complete. So has that objective and gets the desecration of the lands. And then gets the next turn as well, and goes for against all odds, which is an easy one. It's very surprising when people don't do that immediately. So, what happened here was let's see. Okay, so the Frost Sabers were around here. They charged this unit of Liberators. And the fact that I didn't kill them and then failed to shoot them off the next turn, or failed to kill them in the hero phase, should I say, because it wouldn't be a shooting phase, it wouldn't matter. So the fact that they were still alive meant that the Liberators couldn't auto-run into enemy territory. All I could do was translocate the Judicators in there. Bastion couldn't reach in there unless he made a charge onto a unit that was here, who weren't there anymore because I didn't get the priority. So really, I should have had a unit in position to just easily make it into this area. I could have translocated the long strikes, like up here or something. They may have got killed, but that would have meant that the Liberators wouldn't have been blocked off from auto-running in there later. So it's one of these things to think about. So I do get my grand strategy, because I did shoot off the Hunter that was there. So I do have more than my enemy in their setup deployment area. So I got my grand strategy, but not my last battle tactic. So there we go. So it's a win. A nice juicy win for the Stormcast. And there we go. So I can tell you that with the tournament scoring, with the margin of victory, that made it into a 13-7 win, which is nice and solid. Daniel says, fun fact, tabletop games. I like those. Yes, it's probably why you're watching this channel, I imagine. So the next round is against... let's see, so it's more ogres. And this is the Nidus Path's battle plan, which is, so Nidus Path A, these 2 points here, you can teleport from one to the other if there's no enemy nearby, and same for those 2 points there, you can teleport. And the territory is this really weird one here, where there's one objective in the middle of your territory and one on the join between the 2 territories. So the scoring is pretty standard, but it's just the teleporting that's the weird quirk for this scenario. So it's ogres with Kragnos, big Craggy himself. And a very different list to the previous one. There are a couple of similarities. There is the 2 Iron Blasters, and that's pretty much it. That's the main similarity here. So I'm going to bring up this list now. So, Ogre More Tribes, Underguts, Grand Strategy No Place for the Weak, which is to kill all my battle line, which is the worst possible one you could get against me, because I can keep all my battle line off the table until round 3, and then I can just put them down anywhere, just far away from you, and half your army might be dead by then, so it's really difficult grand strategy to complete against me, that one. So Kragnos is in there, obviously. For my setup, I've gone for the standard, so all my battle line and the Annihilators off the table, everyone else on the table, surrounding the Lord Relictor, so he can teleport them, whichever unit he wants. And they're also hiding from the Iron Blasters. So we've got Kragnos, 720 points. Now Kragnos is really the dream model for me to face, because he's obscenely expensive at 720 points. And for my army, he's not that unkillable. Because I can dish out a lot of mortal wounds, which he doesn't have a very good save against. He's got a really good armor save, I think. But his mortal wound protection, I think he only has a 6+ ward. So I'm going to dish out a lot of mortal wounds to the Cragster. Because if you think about it, you've got Bastion's ability that's going to do a couple on average each turn. You've got my Long Strikes and Judicators, both do mortal wounds on 6s. You've got the Annihilators and the Chariot that do impact hit mortal wounds. All my offensive spells are generally mortal wound related. So I don't think he's going to have a good time against my army. And he's so expensive as well that it's like the perfect trade for a unit of Annihilators if they can kill him, which they definitely can. Especially in the Astral Templars, so we can't monstrous rampage them. So it's just the dream scenario seeing Craggy on the table. There is some other juicy stuff as well though. There are lots of Noblars which could screen him out successfully if they try. So there's a unit of 20 Noblars, and they actually do mortal wounds to things that move near them, I think. And there are some Ogre... See, there's a Butcher who is back there with his cooking pot that gives some bonuses. To the Iron Blasters, of course. There are, let's see, 6 Ogre Gluttons, which would be them. There are 4 Iron Guts right there, and there are 4 Lead Belchers there. So, looking at the battlefield here, my priority is, because I'm not going to choose whether to go first or second, I have to hide everybody from the Iron Blasters, because they're the big threat in turn 1. So, my opponent may well make me go first because I'm hiding and there's not much I can accomplish. However, these Lead Belchers are in a perfect position for me to shoot them down. So I'm going to concentrate on the first turn, killing the Lead Belchers. Just gets rid of a unit, and it means I can accomplish something if I'm forced to go first. Because I'm probably not going to bring down any Annihilators in the first turn, looking at this setup. So my opponent does make me go first. I choose against the odds, and I translocate the Ether Wings onto this objective, and I do shoot down the Lead Belchers with Thunderbolt Volley, and also just shooting in the shooting phase as well. So, the reason I did Thunderbolt Volley on such an unworthy target is because I've learned that you don't always get to use it. If you try and hold off, they might just get killed. Especially when you're going first, there could be 2 opponent turns coming up. So, for example, Kragnos could quite easily get there. And I just wouldn't get a chance to use Thunderbolt Volley in that case. So, there we go. I didn't bring down any Annihilators, saving them because I want the Cragster. So 5 victory points. My opponent also does against the odds. Moves the Gluttons onto this objective. The Ether Wings are dead. So you can see that they were killed by the... what are those ones called again? Iron Guts. So the fact that the Ether Wings were up there also meant that I got +1 to hit with the shooting against the Lead Belchers, by the way. So they're gone. And that is succeeded. So successful. Kragnos has moved up. And at this stage I'm thinking if I get first go at the second turn, I can definitely get some Annihilators in here because there's a nice little gap to Kragnos there. That would be nice. I can go straight for him next time. And I don't have to move very much to see him either with the long strikes. They just go to about here. Blast him. Yeah, so I think if I get first crack at the second turn, it's all about taking out the Cragster. However, my opponent gets to go second, so gets the double. Chooses to take it. Now then, this is interesting because there's not a lot I can do if I go next. Well, what I should say, there didn't necessarily need to be a lot I could do. So I think Kragnos could be screened differently. And screening Kragnos successfully and forcing me to go first in round 2 means that you're not going to get doubled by me anytime soon. So I think that is potentially something that could have been done. But my opponent decides to take the turn and gets moving. So everyone's moving up. You can see a delightful beverage was brought. This is my opponent's beverage here. Just decided to take a quick picture of that while the movement was going on. So this lovely snake of Noblars here. And Kragnos bursts through it on his own. And at this point, Kragnos just wants to succeed with a charge down here and wreck face. He wants to kill the long strikes with his impact hits and then he wants to overrun or pile in into the Relictor and anyone else around there and eat them. So that's his plan. And he does make it in there. However, his impact hits require him to roll a 2+ to do any damage, and he rolled a 1. And then he ate 6 wounds from Unleash Hell. Nice. So obviously he eats the Long Strike unit, but the Imperatant and the Relictor are safe, and now Kragnos is sitting there with 6 wounds on him, surrounded by things that could be very painful for him. So, I'm confident I can kill the Kragster in the next turn. But my opponent does pick up 5 points for that round. I go eye for an eye because I'm pretty sure I'm going to kill Kragster, and he's dead. So I did ponder for quite a while whether to bring down Annihilators for this purpose, or whether I should just use things that were in the area already, like Bastion. But I decided the best thing to do in the end was to bring down the Judicators here. These 2 heroes had to move, make space for them to land there, and for the chariot to get past. So they shot Kragnos. The chariot and the Annihilators charged in, and their impact hits were enough to kill Kragnos. They didn't even have to swing in combat, just the impact hits killed him. Because the chariot rolled a 12 for the charge, and the Annihilators rolled a 10. So that was 22 dice, with 4+ being a mortal wound. So Kragnos is dead. And up here, Bastion made a charge into the Iron Guts. And you can see he's killed 2 of them, and therefore got his wounds back. And I've plopped down some Liberators on this objective as well. So, I'm quite happy with how this is looking. The Kragster's dead. I've lost Ether Wings and Long Strikes. But I'm still in a pretty good position, I would say. We've still got Bastion alive. Still got things to come down from the heavens. I've only sent down 1 unit of Annihilators so far. They're not in the best position. But I've also made sure to keep things in range of the Lord Relictor, so he can translocate some of these units around in a minute. So I do not hold more objectives than my opponent, so I just got 4 points for the round. And my opponent gets first crack at round 3 and decides, well, here's Bastion with 2 wounds left, and he fails to kill any of them, so he failed with his attacks and then took 6 wounds, so he's only on 2 wounds now. That's a really dangerous position for him to be in. And you can see everyone else is moving forward. These guys didn't make their charge. So this is another time when maybe I would have considered... Would I have considered giving me the turn in this situation? I don't know, maybe? Because I don't have the Long Strikes anymore. So they're not a threat. What can I accomplish other than killing that unit? Which I think is already somewhat doomed. It's debatable. So anyway, in the... So eye for an eye was actually failed. So they really wanted to kill Bastion, but couldn't do it. So wow, and these guys didn't make their charge either, down here. So it was really an unsuccessful turn, and also, both Iron Blasters failed to hit Bastion. Which was, I think one of them double wand when it was rolling to hit, and one of them just failed to wound. So Bastion is still alive. So my next turn I go for Desecrate Their Lands, which is just going to be an auto-complete because I bring down Liberators behind this bit of terrain here. And I've got my Judicators down up there. So these Liberators are kind of a screen to stop anything coming over here to kill the Judicators. Bastion kills one of them, kills one of the Iron Guts, and then gets all his wounds back because he was able to survive the attacks. So he's now back to full health, fighting fit. And the Chariot's moving out into the centre a bit. And you can see there's a single Annihilator there. So there was an Iron Blaster. I decide, you know what, I'm going to try and take out an Iron Blaster with my Annihilators. It's not the best points trade, because the Iron Blasters are only 170 points, which is incredibly cheap for what they can do. But I thought strategically, take down something that does ranged damage, and I can easily keep away from certain other things by teleporting. And these Annihilators that came down to fight Kragnos are just hiding behind the terrain from the Iron Blaster. So they may well get attacked by these ogres in a minute, but they're not going to get shot off. So I did desecrate lands, so 4 points, because I'm holding 2 objectives, but not more than my opponent. So it's still very close in scoring. And you can see that the other ogre there is dead. Did he fail Battle Shock? He might have done, I can't remember. Something killed him anyway. And it may have just been in the combat on this turn. Oh no, he ran away, there he is. So he fled from combat because my opponent gets first go this time. Again. Runs away, hiding behind that building. And these ogres, I think my Annihilators redeployed to try and get away from them a bit, but didn't go very far, and then they ended up catching them. And they're going to attempt to murder them in a minute. So when the ogres charge, they do a lot of impact hits as well, much like the Annihilators. I think pretty much all ogre units do that. And this lad here, this butcher, is going after these liberators. And 5 points there, so back to full scoring after that disappointing previous round for my opponent. I've gone for barge through enemy lines, which I really can't fail it generally. And you'll see that... let's see what was going on there. So, that position. Where's the Iron Blaster? So the Iron Blaster it appears to be dead now. I think my chariot charged into it. I think it came over here. Chariot came in and killed it. Pretty sure that's what happened there. Up here you can see that Bastion is making his way into the centre now that that guy has been shot off by the Judicators up there. He's coming back into the middle to be a nuisance. So my opponent has a Butcher fighting the Liberators, these Gluttons, and the Noblars, who are just defending this objective with their lives, just completely encircling it. But they don't have many units left. My opponent goes first in the next round, goes for gaining momentum. Has to kill a unit and hold more objectives than me. But does not do it. Only gets the 2 points. And on my next turn, I also go for gaining momentum. I haven't done that one yet. And with the combined powers of all these units and all my various abilities, I managed to murder the unit of Gluttons. So I've got that battle tactic. And okay, this was at the end of the day, so we were very rushed at this point. So we were kind of blitzing through it all, and I didn't take any pictures at all because it was right at the end of the day. But I ended up winning by a decent number of points, something like 7 points, I think. So that led to a win, which is again 13-7. So spicy. So this puts me on table 1 going into the next day. And this is the battlefield that the narrative spice was being fought over. So the different Grand Alliances were duking it out to see which one of them could name this Tzeentch battlefield. And I don't know what the result of that is yet. I think it's still it's a work in progress being painted, I think, so you can see there's some partially painted eyeballs. It's very nice though. And one thing I commented on with this terrain, this kind of paint scheme I think looks really good on terrain. Obviously it's not finished yet, but just the colours looks very bold. Whenever I see this on an army, if I'd seen an army painted like this, I'd think, that took someone about 5 minutes with an airbrush to do their whole army. That would be the first thing that entered my head if I see an army painted this way. With terrain, that's what you want though. You don't want to spend the same amount of hours painting terrain as you do painting every individual miniature. So, in this game, we're up against the filthy Skaven. So let's have a look at the Skaven list. I've got it up on my phone here. Okay, so I've gone for my usual setup of most of my, my 2 Annihilator units and all my Expert Conquerors being off the table. And Bastion is right in the middle. I've got a few units within 12 of the Relictor, but it's a little bit spread out here because this scenario is... Did I actually take a picture of the scenario in the book here? I don't think I did, but it is is it the Silk Steel Nests? Is that what it's called? And that's the one where you can burn objectives on the other side of the table at some point. I think it's from turn 2 onwards. But there's so many objectives that you want to be on them. So I've got units spread out to be touching them all. And one thing that everyone forgets to do, I'm pretty sure it's in the book, that after you take the objective, after you burn it, it can do damage to nearby units. But I've never once remembered to do that, if that is the case. Let's have a look. After an objective has been pillaged, before it is removed from play, player whose turn is taking place must roll 2d6 for each unit within 9 inches of the pillaged objective. If the roll is equal to or greater than the bravery, then they can take d3 mortal wounds. Yeah, no one has ever remembered to do that when I've been playing that scenario, ever. So, anyway, it's that one. And the Skaven, there's lots of them. There's lots of bodies. So what have we got? We've all got these 3 like Skaven portals that they can just teleport between, but not repeatedly. Like limited times they can take each path. And then there is Lord Screeched Vermin King and a Vermin Lord Warbringer. So that's these 2 here. They're both around 400 points. So obviously very scary, big, hideous creatures. This one is more spellcastery, I think. And I think this one is more fighty, but I think they both have spells. There are 2 Master Moulders, and their purpose is to buff up the Rat Ogres, mostly, my understanding. And they can also, on a 3-up, they can bring Rat Ogres back to life when they die, in a similar way that I do with Call for Aid, but it requires a dice roll. And there's one of the Master Moulders. There is also, there's 3 units of 20 Clan Rats, and they're just your standard. There are 2 units of 4 Rat Ogres. Rat Ogres, 280 points. So when I see 280, I think, yes, more expensive than Annihilators, that would be a good trade. However, Rat Ogres on a 3+ can come back if the Master Moulders have a command point available and aren't dead. So, not necessarily a good trade, because they may well come back. So, obviously my main targets are going to be the 2 big vermin things. If I can kill them, that'll make me happy. On the other hand, for scenario purposes, the Clan Rats are actually very good, because they have a lot of bodies on objectives, and they're really good screens as well. Okay. Daniel is obviously very sleepy. Too sleepy, some might say, and is now singing about Rat Ogres, which is fine. So it's obviously a castle to protect the important units, which is what you expect if you've got screens and you're up against my Stormcast. You'd be a fool not to use them. So my first turn, I'm given the first go. So what I'm able to do in the first turn is score points and use the long strikes to try and snipe away at this big bad creature here. It's the only one I could see without moving, so I put all my shots into that, did 10 wounds to it. They both have 13 wounds, I think. So with Bastion as well, we've got 10 wounds on that one. Now this one's weird because it ignores the first 2 wounds in each phase. So because I was shooting it in the hero phase and using Bastion's ability in the hero phase, then it was only able to ignore the first 2 of those wounds. And then in the shooting phase, I then targeted it as well, so it was also able to ignore 2 of those wounds. But it's still taken 10. So it is not safe by any means now, because Bastion could quite easily kill it in future. I've also got Judicators I can bring down if I need to have someone see it. So it's really in trouble. This one, because this one's so wounded, this one on the right is going to be the one that Annihilators are going to have their eye on if the opportunity arises. Just going to try and shoot down the heavily wounded one. So in my opponent's first turn, you can see moving out, screening the Rat Ogres. There's nowhere for anyone to land in the middle there. However, my opponent did describe it as a mistake afterwards, and I have to agree. There is no reason for this gap to be here. As far as I can tell, there is literally no reason at all that the screen does not cover this area instead of this area. If it just shifted a bit this way, suddenly there is nowhere for the Annihilators to attack this giant vermin creature, as far as I can tell. So we're going to put that down as a mistake. Okay, so against the odds was succeeded with, but not more points, not more objectives, so I'm slightly in the lead, am I? I know it's 4 all by the looks of it. If I go with Desecrate Lands and choose this terrain piece, I bring down some Liberators and I translocate my long strikes up there because I want them to shoot down that wounded hero. So they're translocated up there. The Liberators are brought down from the heavens into this position to take this piece of terrain, so I can get my battle tactic, and also they can then protect the long strikes. And they do shoot him down quite handily because he had moved behind a piece of terrain, so obviously they had to move to shoot. Bastion goes forward and charges into some clan rats and kills a load of them, which is nice. And the Annihilators get in there. They land, charge, and murder. So both the big vermin creatures, so that is 795 points worth of creatures dead in one go. So that's really good. But you may think, well, surely that's going to be game over. But a lot of these units are really powerful. We've got the 2 Rat Ogre units that can potentially come back to life, and loads of Clan Rats. Clan Rats just regenerate as well. So it's definitely not all over. My opponent goes for barrage through enemy lines, which is quite easy, because this scenario has a weird map. So these guys annihilate the Liberators, who redeployed to block off, bravely block off the attack to the long strikes. So there's one of them was killed by shooting, I think, and the Liberators did their job of protecting them. And the Liberators were then called to aid down here. If you call to aid with the Lord Relictor, then of course you can translocate them later. So it's a good hero to use for that ability. If you bring them in, because you have to bring them in wholly within 12 of him with call for aid, and then you have to be wholly within 12 for translocate, so it just works out nice. So barrage through enemy lines was successful with a bonus point because of the Galatian veterans, I think. And also burning an objective. So 6 points were scored in that round. My opponent, 7 actually, 7. So very fruitful go. And this objective was burned. So we remove it as soon as the models have gone. We just take the big circle off the table. But that's just representing that it's gone. And I go for barrage through enemy lines, which can't possibly fail because I just drop down and translocate units when necessary. There's Liberators here. I think I translocate the Lord Imperatant and drop down the Liberators and the Judicators in this corner onto this objective, and then do some shooting. I think I shoot down the Master Moulder who was here. That means that if I kill some Rat Ogres, they can't come down within 12 inches of him. They can only come down within 12 inches of the guy over there who is in a less threatening position. So that's successful. I bring down Annihilators here, and they charge in, murder the Rat Ogres, who do come back to life, sadly, on a 3+, so they come back here. I've got Bastion in there as well, and you can see that I don't think there are any Clan Rats left down there from the unit that Bastion was fighting. So I also get 7 points because I used Galatian veterans to get the bonus point on the battle tactic, and got all my points. My opponent goes for gaining momentum and wants to kill the long strikes. So, yeah, there's not much I can do about that, really. As you can see how it ends up. The Annihilators are dead, and the long strikes are all dead, because the Rat Ogres have a short-range shooting attack as well. Bastion is just chilling out in the middle there now. So you can see there's lots of Clan Rats left that are just going around burning off objectives left and right. And they get 6 for this turn, so they burned this one as well. That one's actually gone. You can see I've burned one off as well. And then in my next turn, I go for gaining momentum, and I'm able to get lots of points as well. And I think I burned off this one in that turn, but it hasn't gone away yet. We haven't taken it off the table because there's just too many models on it, so it's awkward to do so. This one's gone, that one's gone, and these two. So there's less objectives on the table to play for. There is a kind of a debate in your head whether you should burn an objective, because obviously once you've burned it, then you can no longer score while sitting on it. So you have to look at the likelihood of your opponent taking it off you, And if that's high, you may want to just burn it. On the other hand, if you do burn it, that gives your opponent less things to worry about, less places to be. They can focus their efforts. If you do not burn them off, you deprive yourself of some points, but you force your opponent to come and take them off you if they want to continue to score in the game. So, yeah, it's a lot to consider in this scenario. So my opponent has gone for eye for an eye. Repositioned some clan rats onto this objective, ready to burn that one. I think that one's going to get burned. Yeah, because it's these two that have gone. So this one next. And they move into position up here, charge Bastion. And they do actually kill Bastion with 1,000,000 rats. So he's dead, but I think... Let's see. Yeah, so he's dead. So eye for an eye was successful. I also go eye for an eye. Because I'm pretty sure I can kill the... How many? There's only... I think there's only... Because one of these rat ogres runs away from Battle Shock, I think there's only like one of them left in the unit. So the Judicators move forward and just shoot him down. I also rallied the Judicators and 2 of them came back with a double 6. So that's hilarious. And then they shot down the rat ogre that was surviving from that unit. So that gets my battle tactic. And to set up my grand strategy, I've got lots of units here and I've blocked this path with Liberators and the Lord Imperatant. So the chances of that one unit killing both of them with shooting and then successfully charging and killing both of these units is slim to none, I would say. And I've also got the Relictor teleported up there as well. The Ether Wings have flown away down there to deny my opponent the take what's theirs grand strategy as well. Because there's only one unit there to my Ether Wings. So I've got so many units there. This unit can't physically reach my territory the next turn. So there's no way they can get their grand strategy. So because of that, I couldn't score much in the last turn. Now, had I been burning objectives, had I not been burning, because remember this one's not there, had I been not been burning the objectives, then I could have scored more points at the end there. But my opponent also had easy opportunities, if we look back, at getting units into position to take these points off me as well. So it played out differently because I did burn them, so you can't really look back and say, shouldn't have burnt them. Sometimes you can. In this instance, maybe could have held on to one of them a bit longer. But alas. So, with the scoring as it is, that means it's a draw. Because I think I've got one more point than my opponent, so not enough for a win, so that's another draw. So we're on 2 wins and 2 draws going into the final round, which is still on the top table, and it's against. So as soon as I see this army, I think, I am going to lose. And I'll explain why. So, I went through at the start the things my army likes to achieve, which is strike first, get the charges in, get the impact hits, focus fire on things, and generally take out the big targets immediately. So, I can give you a very long list of ways that this army doesn't let me do that. So, there is the Edeneth Deepkin, and they're incredibly fast. So, it was described as one of the units has got a 54-inch threat range, which is the Achillean King, who's only 250 points. That seems quite cheap. He's back there somewhere. So that character can potentially travel 54 inches to deliver combat punishment, which is quite obscene, and you don't feel like you can ever be safe against this army. They've got all kinds of running and charging and adding dice or adding numbers to the charge. So distance-wise, they've got the edge. So that means things like the chariot that normally have a speed edge over certain enemy units can't rely on having the speed advantage. Putting things in the heavens is the only way. However, they've also got units for screening. And not only that, okay, a couple more things as well. So you know how I generally like to focus fire on one thing and then attack it and bring it down? Because I don't know if it's a sub-faction thing, but you have to only shoot at the closest enemy unit with all your shooting. They can just put something terrible close to you, and you have to shoot at that instead. Yes. And then, in addition to that, they also have about 3 million ways that they can strike first in combat, even when you've charged something. So there's just, I think there's a turn in the game where they just always hit you first regardless, like just all their units can go first. And then once per game they can just decide, you know what, I think our units are going to fight first this turn. I think that would be nice. So, yeah. Not feeling confident at all, considering it's, to my mind, it seems like the hard counter to my list. All those things I've just listed there are things you would like to have in your list for precisely countering everything that my army does. So, I'm hoping that I can cling on for either maybe a draw or a narrow loss, which would maybe keep me in the top 3 for the tournament, which would get me a trophy. So we'll see whether I can pull that off. I'm just going to have to try and weasel points and then take opportunities as they come. So is my opponent going to make me go first or second here? So it's close to the chest scenario, which is this really weird one with the territory like that and the objectives sitting between them on those sides. So you've got this kind of weird E or weird shape. And you have an alpha objective. Okay, that's another reason I don't feel confident. Alpha objective, but the enemy can just move pretty much wherever they want. And the advantage that has over teleporting is that when you're teleporting, you have to be 9 inches away from the enemy. When you're just moving, of course, you only have to be 3 inches away, and they can just move 1,000 inches without teleporting. So, not confident. So I'm never going to be able to keep my alpha objective really safe. I've got everyone, the usual suspects, off the table. My opponent has positioned so that I can't fit a unit of annihilators down into the corner. Protect the king. So what else is in the list? So other than the king, there is the... what's the other one called? Eidolon of Mathlan, which is this one here. The Aspect of the Storm, that's 355 points. So that's going to be a good target for annihilators. Battle line, there are 9 Achillean Morsar Guard, and then 3 units of 3. So the 9 are here, there's 3, and there's 3. So they're really good when they charge, which of course they're going to because all those reasons I just went into. Then there are 10 Namati Reavers there. And there's an endless spell, which is that, which is Lauchon the Soul Seeker. And yeah, that's that. So it's not many units. So what I'm thinking is, best way for me to try and weasel points out of this game and maybe get something out of it is to just focus and try and kill a unit each turn. Forget about the big 9 fish unit. No point trying to kill that. There's too many of them. And it's going to take too long. Pick a unit each turn that's killable and get rid of it. And then by the end of the game, my opponent won't have enough units left to score too many points, hopefully. That's my goal. So because of the deployment, the closest thing to me, the closest thing to my long strikes actually turns out to be the Aspect of the Storm. I was planning to kill that unit first as my first target. Just take them out the game, and my opponent's got less things to score with. However, they weren't the closest unit, so because I can't really move them unless I translocate them, and they're all -1 to hit in the first round as well. I don't know whether that's just for the whole game or whether it's like an aura from somebody or whether it's only in the first turn, but they were -1 to hit at the start of the game. So I want to translocate the Ether Wings to get them within 12 of my target. So, the long strikes can actually see there, by the way. You can just about tell that they can see through that gap. Because this terrain, it looks like it overhangs a bit more than it does because it's got spikes poking out. So, I go for gaining momentum, because just to be a bit different, obviously against the odds is the easy one, and so when I pick gaining momentum, I have to pick an enemy unit to kill. So I pick this thing, and my opponent then immediately declares, okay, well, finest hour it is, which doesn't really concern me, because I'm planning to really only kill it with mortal wounds anyway, for the most part. And I think it's got about 12 wounds, so shooting it in the hero phase, shooting it in the shooting phase, charging it with annihilators, And then all my attacks I'm going to be putting on it from those 2 units have got Ren 2, so potentially it could fail some saves. And depending how the hero phase shooting goes, then I can decide whether I want to bring the Judicators down as well to shoot it. Obviously they'd have to be like here to make sure it's the closest unit, otherwise they're just not allowed to shoot it, because that's how Edenith Deepkin work apparently. So I'm going to see how that shooting goes and then decide what I need to commit. But another option here would have just been to go for against all odds and just walk onto an objective, which would have prevented, probably wouldn't have inspired my opponent to use Finest Hour. But we'll see if that's going to be a problem. I'm planning on mortal wounds anyway. So, I do quite a few wounds to it actually in the hero phase, shooting and Bastion's lightning. And then, because I've got the Ether Wings there for the +1 to hit, so I decide that I'm not going to bring the Judicators down yet because I don't need them. Got him up to 7 wounds. However, this is the Annihilator's charge. Wow, wow, wow. I'm not sure exactly how many wounds it has. It's between 9 and 12, I think. But the first charge rolled a 6. Reroll, got a double 1. So, no battle tactic for me. And I've actually been pretty good with my charges at this event until just now. So, as soon as that fails, I am pretty convinced that it's game over. Because my ability to kill 1 unit a turn has been drastically hindered now. I'm going to have to put resources into killing that over 2 turns now. And even then that might not be enough. So, the enemy starts spreading out. And my opponent here, maybe, what word would describe his playstyle? Very nonchalant. Seems like the kind of guy that's probably played 1,000 games of Age of Sigmar, maybe 1,000 games with just this army. Because there isn't really any time taken over the decisions, it's just, okay, it's my turn, right, swoop, 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 just moving everything into position in seconds, and immediately start rolling dice, like barely even looking at the table, throwing a handful of dice. Okay, that thing's dead, that thing's dead, that thing's dead. Just really, really quick play. So someone who's clearly very knowledgeable about the game and knows their army and the rules inside and out. So, everything moving into position. So this unit has just positioned itself to be the closest unit, so I can't shoot at the thing that's wounded. So it's obviously bad. Now, had that thing died, I would actually be feeling really good about this game now. I would be feeling really good about being able to cling on for a draw or a narrow result either way, if that thing had been killed by the Annihilators, which is what I was definitely hoping for. So one thing I obviously haven't learned, because previously I've done the same thing, is pick a battle tactic that relies on me killing a unit and then being overconfident in a unit's ability to do it on their own instead of using support. So I could have easily just put the Judicators in and they could have finished that thing off with mortals. Definitely. They're definitely capable of doing that if it's only got a couple left. I'm not sure exactly how many it has on its profile. It's not a huge amount. Maybe about 10 or so, maybe. So they definitely would have been in with a chance of finishing it off. But, alas. So the Annihilators are going to get killed. Everyone makes their charge into them. So you can see these are spreading out and just preventing a future unit of Annihilators from coming down over here and attacking maybe the king. So Annihilators will get eaten. Because everything gets to attack before them, pretty much, even if they didn't get killed by the first thing. So 4 points there, with against all odds. I go for against all odds now, because I need to get some points on the board. So, I'm going to try and just have this objective with the chariot. And, yeah, I don't think I've done too much else in this round. Just scored points. Okay, the only other major thing that happened, Annihilators came down here, whomped their way in. Because the screen was so close to the king, they were able to actually hit over it. So some of them were able to reach the king, and he's on 1 wound left. Wow, wow, wow. But the screen died. So, yeah, the Annihilators have been quite a failure so far. Failed to charge that thing and then leave this guy on 1 wound remaining, which is very annoying. because my goal of killing a unit a turn is now completely in tatters, and I don't really see a way back now, because all my hard-hitting units from the heavens are done, and I don't really have the killing power to deal with everything else. So, still got long strikes though. So you can see, just to try and make them survive if anything comes after them, Mystic Shield and Bless. So my opponent goes for Desecrate Their Lands, which is going to be an auto with that one. Just move some fishes over there. These can just swim 1,000 inches and get close to the chariot, so they can charge into that. And in fact, everyone can. And they surround it, and it's obviously dead. And when all my units were exploding as well, I don't think I was really doing any mortal wounds. You don't expect to do a lot, but I think in this game it was particularly bad that I didn't get any real 6s on death. So, Desecrate the Land successful, 6 points. Because the alpha objective has been claimed. And whichever one I pick, it was a case of, I'm thinking about which one I'm picking, and then my opponent would say, well, it doesn't really matter which one you pick because there's no way you can stop me taking them. Which is just true because they can just swim 1,000,000 inches without me being able to stop them. So it's kind of one of those games. I go for eye for an eye, because I'm pretty confident I can kill a unit. And I do actually kill the king. So I translocate my long strikes into a safer position over there. I've brought down Judicators here with a Liberator screen in front of them, and they've shot down the king, so that's a start. So I'm just maximising how many points I'm going to score between now and the end of the game now. So I'm definitely going to lose, but I can make it as close as possible so I get more points and maybe get in the top 3 for a trophy. Yeah, so my opponent goes eye for an eye as well. Oh no. Yeah, eye for an eye and then gaining momentum in 2 consecutive turns. So there's not a lot of pictures of the game here. So, because I think we were just blitzing through it all. So these two obviously get murdered. The Relictor gets murdered, which means that I can't use Call for Aid because all my heroes are dead. And then some Liberators get murdered. So everyone's getting killed left and right. And the long strikes turn out to be the only thing left, because up there, the Judicators hang on for a little bit, but then they get killed as well. So for me, scoring points, all I'm really doing is just trying to score desecrating lands with the long strikes, which is something I can achieve, and then trying to shoot things off. So I managed to get a point in round 5. However, because the unit up there did get killed, then I do get my grand strategy, which is nice. So that gets me some extra points. So it's obviously a loss, but if you're looking at this, you can see that my opponent's, I think he's only got 2 units left, and I've only got 1. So I was thinking this thing could have easily died in the first turn with the strategy I was using. And had that been killed in turn 1, I think that would have been a very interesting game, actually. As it was very much an uphill struggle, and I didn't feel like at any point like I was in a position to win the game. Even from looking at or hearing about the opposing army's rules, to be honest. But had that thing died, it would have definitely been more interesting. Because once it didn't die and the Annihilators were wasted, then I think that was mostly game over, and I was just clinging on and trying to maximise my points from that point onwards. So that is the end of the tournament. 2 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss, which I'm very happy with. There were some very, very good players at this event. There were some newer-ish players as well. So it was a good mixture. It was a very friendly atmosphere at this one. And I ended up finishing 4th, which I'm not going to begrudge, because I think it was a pretty decent performance. I'm sure there are a few things I could have done differently. If anyone spotted anything, by the way, that I didn't point out in my analysis that I should have done differently, then let me know. If you think there's any flaws in my list, I'm thinking of, because the Liberators are more expensive now than Vanquishers, I could get some Vanquishers at some point and bringing them in to be the cheap battle line, because I feel like some of the battle tactics are just unachievable for me. If I had more Killia, now that does actually make sense, more Killia, I had more units that were killier than other units, then I think that would definitely help for some of the battle tactics. However, the battle tactics are going to disappear in a month anyway, so why am I even thinking that? I'm sure the new General's Handbook is coming out then, so we'll have to see what happens in there, and whether the battle tactics are vastly different and you need different units to achieve them. Maybe Liberators would be perfect for the new battle tactics. So I'm keeping an open mind. With Stormcast, I tend to just get a bit of everything anyway. So it's difficult for me to do a spam list because I just buy one. I think the only things I've got 2 of, let's see. I've got 2 units of the Grandhammer Annihilators because I just felt like that was the only way to make my collection vaguely competitive without chopping things up and adding different weapon options to certain units. So that's the only thing. I've got 2, I think. And I've got 3 ballistas because... How did I get 3 ballistas? Did they come in the... Did they come in Soul Wars, the ballistas? I ended up with 3 of them somehow anyway, because I just thought it was cool to have 3 of them and the Lord Ordinator. I don't think they've ever actually been amazing since I've tried to use them. I don't think their rules have ever been that wildly competitive since I've been using them. But I just like them. I think they're really cool, the ballistas. I've got 3 of them. So that's the spammiest list I could take, probably. Other than that, I've just got 1 of everything. So 1 unit of Dracodian Guard, 1 unit of Prosecutors, 1 unit of Shield Annihilators, 1 Stardrake, 1 Chariot, 1 unit of Praetors, 1 unit of Retributors, 1 unit of Evocators. So yeah, I've got lots of different units that just aren't competitive and aren't that useful at the moment. I've got Yndrasta, I've got loads of first edition heroes, I've got the Herald or the Venator, the Azeros, the Lord Veritant. Is that the one with the Griffhound that's like a... He was brought in as like a Dispel character. Yeah, so I've got lots of options. I've got Prondis on the painting table. I'm sure I'll work on him at some point. So whatever the meta decrees is good, I can usually get 1 of them sometimes. But I generally can't make a spam list, and I'm not going to buy 10 of whatever the new hotness is and then have to replace it in 6 months with 10 of something else. That's just not my style, so I'm always going to have kind of a mixed army. I could maybe get some more long strikes, because that's not much of a commitment, just painting 3 more models, and they are very solid. I can't see them getting much weaker as time goes on. Maybe, who knows. They are quite good. As far as tactically, I think it's a pretty solid setup with the units that I generally keep off the table and the ones that I keep on the table. I think keeping all my battle line, all my expert conquerors off the table to keep them alive until later. I often give my opponent a head start and points because of that, but it keeps them alive towards the end game, and it also just keeps them alive in general because they are the easiest things to kill, probably. Because the long strikes, I think, are, unless you count the Ether Wings, the long strikes are very easy to kill, but they can be further away from you when they hit you, so they are safer in that respect. Whereas Judicators have to be full 6 inches closer to you to shoot you, so that just makes them more vulnerable. And the Liberators, well, they don't really do much. And my overall strategy of setting up an army to deal with monsters and not get hindered by monsters and whomp monsters in the face with hammers, I think it was fairly successful. Killed Kragnos, dealt with some other key-looking armies. However, one thing my list, in some ways it's a struggle, in some ways it's good. I can score loads of points, even when I'm losing, even when it's going to be a draw. I can score loads and loads of points because I can teleport everywhere, I can bring things down from the heavens. I've got useful, versatile units like that that I can just bring down all over the table. Right to the end of the game, I can keep just zapping things around. However, I struggle to stop my opponent scoring points. I don't have a lot of bodies to put on objectives. I don't have survivable units to plonk on objectives to just sit there and not die, because the Liberators certainly aren't that. What I would like to fill that role would be Shield Annihilators, but that's not what they're for, apparently. I think the way Shield Annihilators look with those massive shields, they should just plop down and maybe if they don't make a normal move that turn, they just have a really good ward save or something. You would think that's what they do. They plop down somewhere and they're like an immovable object. Stormcast feel like they should have units like that. They're heavily armoured up to the eyeballs, more armoured than probably any other army. And yeah, that's something that's missing in the Stormcast, I think. Just something that sits there and does not die, except Bastion, obviously. But even he's vulnerable to some things. But I do think Shield Annihilators should fill that role, because they are really cool. And I've got 3 of them sitting there. I've got more unpainted, because there's no point painting them really if I'm not going to use them at the moment. They're a bit cheaper now. But they're still in that area where they're competing with the likes of Judicators. And I think I would rather have Judicators at the moment. Okay, so it's about time to wrap this video up. It's getting late now. Thanks for everyone that's tuned in throughout. Don't forget to like the video. You're still here. And if you're watching this later, don't forget to like as well. And subscribe if for some ungodly reason you haven't already. And check out all the links in the description. There is Twitter. There's the Andy and Rem Show Discord server. So on the subject of the Andy and Rem Show, the world's first live Age of Sigmar show, we are going to be back soon. Rem is dealing with some things that he will probably tell you about shortly in the next few weeks, and then we should be able to get back rolling with the show, maybe on a full-time basis again. So that means every week potentially. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Back to a regular scheduled show once a week. That'd be really good. Because he's back from his musical tour, and he's got a couple of other things he needs to take care of. And I'm sure he'll detail all the ins and outs of his escapades and adventures on the next episode of the show when that's back. So keep your eyes peeled on social media for that, for announcements. And for anyone who is interested in other game systems on this channel, I'm attending a Kings of War tournament next week. And it means I have to wake up on a Saturday at about 3 o'clock in the morning to go there on the train, which should be hilarious. And apart from that, oh, obviously, if you've reached this point in the video, you're obviously so committed that I should just be begging you for all your life savings, pledged via Patreon to keep this channel afloat in these dark and turbulent times, which basically goes directly towards me attending tournaments and reporting on them. It's obviously not the cheapest thing in the world to do, especially the ones that require travelling. Anything in Nottingham is pretty easy for me because that's where I am. So tournament tickets is pretty much where 100% of the Patreon money goes at the moment. And that's the kind of content that people like to see. So let's get the thumbnail back up. Quite satisfied with that round of games there. 5 games, only lost 1. A couple of nice wins, a couple of draws. Solid, I would say. May tweak the list for the next one. I've also got maybe a bit of a surprise coming as well in terms of Age of Sigmar, which I'm not going to reveal yet, so I think it's going to be quite fun. And then I've also got my Caradron Overlords, who are still on the painting table. I just need to finish painting that ironclad at some point and they'll be ready for action. So I look forward to that. And on that note, don't forget to leave a comment as well. All that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.